Boy, howdy. Do we have some Georgia football news to dive into? Is it on the field stuff? Absolutely not. So I'll just go ahead and spoiler alert you.
Oh yeah,
Nobody got
it's the off season.
nobody
we don't do on the
transferred.
field stuff here.
Nobody transferred. There was not an injury. Nobody's in the pokey. So jail.
Okay, I'll take your word for it.
You ought to. But that being said, no one got arrested.
That's good.
No one's in jail.
That's very
We're
good.
partying. We just have we have some Georgia football news to dive into here, PJ.
Okay.
All right.
Let's hear it.
So, as I mentioned, nothing on the field related, but still a lot of big stuff that's going to change kind of the way Georgia operates in the future. And listen, this one hits near and dear to my heart. But this is the time of the year where Georgia and all the other schools come out with their athletic budgets for the coming calendar year, 2022, 2023, right? They're moving the press box at Sanford Stadium.
Oh, okay.
Which hurts because anyone who's listening, who's ever been to Sanford Stadium, and specifically if you've ever been in the press box, knows that might be the most prime seating in the entire stadium. I don't know whom was in charge of designating that location at Sanford Stadium for the press box, but they had to work for like the AJC or be like somebody big time up top, because it is, you always felt like you're getting away with something because it's an open air press box. You're at from the 45-yard line to the other 45-yard line. It's just gorgeous.
It's like on the sideline, just like
kind of where
in the press box.
It's like, so it's underneath the second level.
Okay. This is not me trying to steal your thunder. I really am just trying to figure out why it's so amazing.
Well, it's where it's okay. So you have the first level of seating, right? And so you start at the 50-yard line, go up the first level of seating,
of course,
right? And then the higher you get, the better view you'll have of the field. So typically the best seats in the house aren't the ones that are right on the first row, right? Because it's hard to see everything. You want to be up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you get to the top of that first section. That's the expensive seats, 30, 40 rows up, right at the 50, between the 40s, right? Those are the expensive seats, right? The press box is directly above those.
Oh, so in between
the second level and the first level.
Okay.
Prime seating area. And all I could ever think while I was in there was,
I can see where that would be an advantage.
Well, all I could ever think was these would be some pretty sweet.
Just normal
suites.
Seats. Yeah.
No, suites.
Oh, shit. Yeah, I can imagine.
And so Georgia has come out with another renovation project for Sanford Stadium. This one involving building a new press box, southwest part of the stadium. Still, because everything has moved. I don't know when they built this press box, but certainly everything has moved more towards TV coverage. And so you need whoever's coming in from ESPN, right? Whether it's Herbstreit and Fowler, or you'll have Nessler and Danielson coming in from CBS. They need a prime spot to be able to look down, watch the game, and call the game. And you want to be as courteous as possible to those media members covering the game. And so it's still going to be nice. And it honestly, it'll probably be an improvement in terms of how nice it is inside the press box.
Right.
But in terms of locale, it doesn't get better than what it is right now.
Well, are they going to take your idea basically? Is that because you just said
yes, they're turning it into luxury suites.
It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And so it's going to be for the super boosters.
Right. The ones who are getting those NILs done.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I want to circle back to that, but also something big for us locally here. Josh Brooks, Georgia's athletic director, was asked whether or not they have already started conversations with the city of Jacksonville about renewing their contract for the Georgia-Florida game.
Mm-hmm.
And that currently goes through 2023. So this year and next year, they are contractually obligated to play Florida in Jacksonville.
Right.
Right? This is directly from Josh Brooks. We're not in the discussion of that right now. We signed a deal a few years ago with an option for 2 more years through 2023. We haven't gotten into the weeds on that yet. We'll discuss that at a different time. It just hasn't been on our radar right now with other pressing matters. If they wanted to re-sign that contract, I think they already would have up that.
I was going to say, yeah, it seems pretty simple. Just, hey, you guys good with what you're fine? Okay, cool. That seems like something that, I mean, if it was pressing, it could get done in an afternoon.
Correct.
Honestly.
And I think the price tag will go up on that game for Jacksonville if they want to keep it. But here's the key part that goes into this next. Kirby Smart has said before, all I ever say is that the home atmosphere we have is incredible. Speaking of Sanford Stadium in Athens, right?
Mhm.
And the ability to bring recruits in is big. I stand by the fact we miss opportunities and everyone else in the country doesn't. Or every single year you're playing a game in Jacksonville. The only I'm trying to think top of my head. Obviously, the Red River rivalry,
right,
played at the Cotton Bowl every year. Are there any other neutral site rivalry games that are played every?
Arkansas,
Texas A&M, Arkansas is a pretty big one.
But I'd say no. I think that's what makes those. It's not specifically what makes those rivalries so special, but it's a big part of it for the fan experience and everything like that is and what makes them so notable is the fact that they are at a neutral site. So yeah, I don't think you have a lot of that around college football in general, even with the ones that you would expect. Well, maybe not, but yeah, no, I think that's basically it. Texas, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arkansas, and of course probably the biggest out of those three, Georgia, Florida.
Right. So when you're Kirby Smart and you're sitting there thinking, every 2 years, I could have Florida coming to Athens. Like, how gargantuan is that game?
Yeah, that's incredibly massive in every sense of the word. And I think even you look at it on the flip side. I mean, can you imagine if you're Florida coming up this year? And I understand Billy Napier's first year and everything like that, but Georgia's coming off a national championship. You said we got the defending national champions coming down the swamp.
Right.
Probably, who knows, maybe be top ranking at that point too. What a recruiting pitch that would be as well.
And
so I mean,
if you need a fiscal kind of way to look at this, so Georgia is getting paid $4.25 million to play at Mercedes-Benz Stadium this year. That is per their budget released on Friday. They are going to make projected in revenue from ticket sales when Sanford comes to Sanford Stadium, week 2, I believe. Yeah, week 2, $3.51 million. So that's what they're projecting in total ticket sales, how much they are going to earn in revenue from the Sanford game. As for a big-time home game, Auburn is projected to bring in $5.1 million. SEC game, right? Another 1.5 on top of that, just because the tickets get more expensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
As for Vanderbilt, they're still a SEC opponent, $4.85 million. Tennessee right at 5, Georgia Tech right at 5. You look at Florida and Jacksonville, Georgia's revenue $3.5 million.
Yeah, significant drop off.
So can you imagine how expensive? Easily a $5 million game. So you can easily say Georgia's losing $1.5 million by playing that game in Jacksonville.
Well, not to disrespect Auburn by any means or anything like that, but if they're 5.8, right? I would almost say you could easily expect Florida to be 6.
Yeah. Well,
here's ticket prices going up and things like that, right?
But here's the flip side of that, which we have to consider here is if Georgia was the road team that year, you're making $3.5 million in revenue that you wouldn't have made otherwise.
Very true.
So you have to look at it that way as well. But talking about recruiting for Kirby Smart, you can tell you get to recruit in Jacksonville, right? You get to bring recruits in to go to that game. That's not the same as bringing them to your home stadium, taking them through your new $80 million facility, right? Showing them where they could have the couch-sized lockers that you're giving out to these guys now, right? With their placards above. It's not the same. You're going to the Jaguar Stadium.
Yeah.
Which I would be willing to bet Georgia has a nicer locker room than the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Probably.
Jaguars don't have to recruit their players.
I think generally, yes. What you're saying is right. You also get down to the nitty gritty of yes, that's an extraordinary, amazing recruiting opportunity to be able to bring them to your facilities to easily the biggest home game of the year if it was in Athens and have that environment as well. It's already rowdy down in Jacksonville, when Georgia and Florida face off. Can you imagine a home game with Florida there and what the fans would be like? The atmosphere would be incredible. off the charts. That being said, I do think like it's relative to a certain extent. I think there might be recruits that do enjoy the trip to Jacksonville. There might be recruits and players in their own right. Now I know this is getting away from talking about the money,
Yeah.
but sometimes, wowing a high school football player or a college football player is just simply about what they enjoy too. And playing in an NFL stadium, going down to Jacksonville, neutral site, still filling the stands up. It has a feel to it that I do think is interesting and is cool while it's not a home game. Although I can completely understand and agree that it being a home game does have way more advantages. You might have recruits that actually like that. I don't know.
It's historic. It's one of those rivalry games, like we said, top of your head. Like you have Texas, Oklahoma, Georgia, Florida that play those neutral site rivalry games every single year, right?
Let's be real. A&M and Arkansas is an afterthought.
Yeah,
Right.
I don't know how many people really know about that
And that
one.
kind of just started happening too. So
Yeah, with Jerry World.
Yeah.
I think it's been about 10 years now that's been going on. But that being said,
that's just us getting old.
yeah, a couple other quick notes out of Athens. News broke a couple days ago. Todd Monken, Georgia's offensive coordinator, getting a new deal. He was previously at $1.25 million a year, got an 80% raise there to $2 million annually to be Georgia's OC.
There you go.
That's what happens when you get the ring on the finger.
That's it.
And your team averages 38.2, I believe, points per game.
You listen to the fans, they're averaging like 21 points a game.
Yeah.
Right. But no, exactly. A very good offensive output, obviously, in a national championship as well. And later in the year, again, like later in the year too, I understand there were struggle points and whatnot, but when you needed that offense to make a play, they were making plays. So yeah, good for him. Good for him. That to me certainly earned it.
Listen, the only point that Todd Monken scored last year that mattered was one more than Alabama in the national championship.
For sure. And again, if you don't score points against Michigan, you lose. If you don't score points against Kentucky, you lose.
You know what I'm saying. You won a national championship because you outscored Alabama. That's how games work, PJ.
So true.
One team scores more than the other. Now you got that ring on your finger, and he's getting broke off. And Kirby Smart's about to get broke off too. I can't wait to see what those numbers look like there for the head man in Athens. Other notes to get to here, PJ. We know the times for the first 4 weeks of the season. Oregon obviously is going to be a 3:30 start. Samford, week 2, your home opener, is going to be a 4:00 start. That'll be on the SEC network. But then the game a lot of people are circling as the hurdle for Georgia early in the season on September 17th, your first true road test SEC game. You head up to South Carolina to Williams-Brice to take on Spencer Rattler and them boys.
Yeah.
And the SEC done did you dirty because that is a noon kick.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You know what? As I am saying this, I'm kind of changing my mind on it.
Slowly but surely.
If this was in Athens, I would hate the noon kick because it's a sleepy noon kick. Because it's not your home opener, right? It is South Carolina coming to town with Spencer Rattler, but it's just kind of a sleepy noon kick at home where Georgia famously in the past has struggled. South Carolina upset Georgia a few years back during a noon kick, right? But now that I'm thinking about it, Williams-Brice is one of the more hostile environments at night.
Yeah.
And especially early in the season when they still have hope, right? It's been described pretty aptly as a hornet's nest.
Yeah.
When they're playing the Sandstorm.
And that energy.
And you have all the towels.
You got the Gamecock sound in the background just going crazy.
As long as Ace Sanders doesn't line up, I think Georgia's going to be okay. But
it's very true.
Yeah, I think now that I'm saying it out loud, I think a noon kick is preferable to a 7:30 kick at Williams-Brice.
It all depends on how you show up and how you start, I think. But no, I mean, I agree with you there.
I think after 2011, Georgia wants no part of night games at South Carolina.
Of course not. I'll say also, though, I mean, that's one of the most respectable things about South Carolina in general to me, and I'm always the one trying to talk people down.
Is there anything respectable about South Carolina?
Hold on.
All right.
I'm always trying to talk people down from the South Carolina hype that we get every single year for no reason. But anyway, that environment can be fun, can be hostile to play in and to walk into. And I wouldn't be surprised if they're pretty rowdy and wild even at noon. But
yeah,
you do have a little more of like, once you, again, it's how you start. with noon games like that, once you get like a demoralizing play or something like that, like if Georgia comes out, picks off Spencer Rattler, or has like a big offensive play early, big offensive
Jalen Carter
touchdown,
just like falls on him a couple
something
of
like
times.
that. Yeah. In a noon game in that environment, it's very easy to flip over at 12:25. Like you flip over at 12 and everything's going crazy. You have just like towers whipping around and then you flip back over at 12:20. It's 14-0, and everyone's already going to get seconds and thirds at the concession stand. Like,
it's true.
So I think, like you said, that is plays into Georgia's favor a little bit. So
I don't know. I'm still conflicted on how I feel about it. Right now, I want to say noon kick's a good time for Georgia. Is it as good as a 3:30 kick? No, but
yeah,
I think noon kick's better than a 7:30 kick just in terms of upset potential there. But I could be wrong. Could still be a sleepy noon kick. You never know.
You're right. I think what's weird is like you're speaking about this from a Georgia fan's perspective, and with all the good comes all the bad memories as well of getting upset and things like that.
It's always the noon kick, PJ. I still remember Vanderbilt, where Isaiah McKenzie gets wrecked by Zach Cunningham because we ran a jet sweep on like 4th and 1. Right? It's always the noon kick. Kentucky has upset Georgia during a noon kick. It's always the noon kick that get you.
I know it's Michigan State for me. Michigan State noon kick, we're gonna lose. It's gonna happen.
All right, we got to quit. We got to quit looking back on all the upsets.
Yeah. I'm just saying. I think I'm like speaking to it from someone who never believes the hype with South Carolina and doesn't believe the hype with Spencer Rattler kind of thing. And I think by 12-20,
listen,
this game's going to be
by
in
the
control.
chickens enough.
No, it's going to be in control.
You get bit by the chickens enough. You learn to respect the chickens once you get bit by them enough. Okay, we got to take a break.
See.
We have a guest coming up next, Matt Brown from Extra Point. With Matt Brown is going to join us next to talk about name, image, and likeness. He put out an interesting article about what the actual value is and what the actual market is for NIL deals, and if anyone truly knows what those numbers look like. We'll talk to Matt next, right here on ESPN Radio.
anything is virtually impossible, right? Like I reached out to Texas A&M. I filed open records requests for every school in Division One, or public school in Division One, actually, to get an idea for how many athletes have sent in compliance forms indicating they've done NIL deals. And some schools actually shared the value and which which companies were involved, but most schools decline to share that information. That's their their right if they think that that's not something that's actually a public record. And the marketplace software companies that just sometimes publicize some of that data are not really taking into account anything that's happening with the collective. So it's really difficult with any sense of accuracy for a reporter to be able to say, hey, this is the going rate for a quarterback, or this is what a typical NIL deal is actually worth. The data we have right now just isn't very strong.
Is it hard to determine that? Because to me, at least, it seems like the reality is the going rate for an NIL deal for a quarterback is vastly different than the going rate to get a 4 or 5 star quarterback to commit for your school.
So that's part of it. There's really two challenges here, right? For just about every school, they are telling their athletes that they need to disclose the deals that they are doing with anybody, whether that's through a collective or through an energy drink company to sell stuff on Instagram. They're supposed to send that stuff to compliance so they can have records for it and make sure that doesn't break any NCAA or state laws. What's happening right now is that very few athletes are actually doing that. What I have been hearing from compliance professionals is that the disclosure rate is somewhere between 20 and 30% at most schools. And part of that is because, for whatever reason, a lot of very smart athletes believe that if you don't tell compliance about a deal, you don't have to pay taxes on it. Well, friends, that's not true. Yeah. Some people are going to get some really rude wake-up calls here in a couple of months. So that means, if A&M theoretically says, hey, listen, only one of our incoming recruits has a deal, they might be telling the truth. The recruits just didn't tell the school, which is something that technically under state law they are supposed to be doing. So that's one issue. The other issue is that if you are a gigantic brand like a Buffalo Wild Wings, or if you are a very well-funded, professionalized collective, you're not doing a deal with a kid that you're trying to get to commit to your school through market price or no cap. You're not doing it through a conventional marketplace, which means that when those marketplaces release some of their data and show, hey, here's what the deals look like, they're undercounting that market significantly because they're always showing the data from small businesses doing deals. And we don't really have a great way to ask anybody who doesn't want to disclose what they're paying a quarterback to do it. There's only a handful of lawyers that are doing it right now. And that's mostly to drum up business. We don't even know if they're telling the truth.
So when you hear that Tennessee potentially has a quarterback coming in from California that already has a multi-million-dollar deal in place, and Tennessee as a state has passed a law in which the universities in that state can work with NIL companies and lawyers and agents to try to facilitate some of these deals, does that tell you that's what it's going to cost to get a quarterback to your school, and maybe we're just not seeing it in other states where the numbers are actually being put out there like that?
Maybe, right? I mean, what I have heard, a 5-star quarterback right now is going to be in the 7-figure range. I know that the very popular way of that particular deal has been reported is, hey, he's an $8 million quarterback. Well, we don't actually know that. According to the contract, which this lawyer, who is not shutting up, much to the dismay of his fellow lawyers, has put this out there, it's an $8 million deal over 4 years. It's $2 million a year. And we have no idea what actually happens if this young man doesn't win the starting job. Because 5-star quarterbacks typically don't ride the bench for 2 years, especially in an era we have instant eligibility. And for 5-star quarterbacks, that even as predictive as recruiting rankings are, and they definitely are, I don't think anybody in the Southeast who's a football fan would disagree with that. 5-star QBs wash out all of the time. Like it's essentially a 55-45 coin flip here. That the guy that you sign is going to be a productive SEC caliber starter. So what happens if he leaves and decides that he wants to go to UCLA or to Fresno State or to Cal or something where he knows he's going to start because he gets beat out by another high caliber kid at Tennessee? We don't know. And for other professional athletes, there's some level of disclosure. There's some element of we know what these kind of contracts look like. We're taking one guy's word on all of this, and that's not good enough for me as a reporter.
Yeah, I mean, just for an example, we just watched a 3-star quarterback beat out a couple of 5 stars and a 4-star and win a national championship. So, yeah, what you're saying is completely fair. But it's to me, looking at it from the scope of what NIL was supposed to be, which I go back to the UCF punter, gosh, almost got to be 10 years ago now, who had to take down his YouTube page because it was so popular that he couldn't monetize off of it. And if he was either have to choose between playing football or continue to monetize off the YouTube channel, and eventually just chose the YouTube channel, right? That's where I saw NIL as just the opportunity to take off restrictions, but the return on investment theoretically should be there for whoever the advertisers are in this. I just, like you said, what's the return on investment for an $8 million deal for a quarterback you don't know is going to play?
Well, in terms of like marketing capacity, the answer is zero. Like it's or close to zero. It's a terrible investment. Anybody who is trying to reach out to a 17-year-old and sign them to a large deal in the hopes that that their endorsement capabilities will pay off in marketing dollars for your brand, everyone knows that's a terrible deal. And that's why that doesn't really happen with the pros. It doesn't really happen very much in Europe, where 16 and 17-year-olds are professional athletes, relatively common. But the boosters that are doing this are not giving money to this collective because they're hoping to sell a few more trucks. They're doing it because they think Tennessee will win football games. And if a 5-star quarterback actually does pan out, and that's somebody who's able to compete in an all SEC level and help Tennessee win something for the first time since 2000, then they'll feel what they got their money's worth. These are the same people that have been given money under the table to recruits. I think we might err if we look at this at the bagman market and try to assign the same kind of like marketing instincts that we would do for Buffalo Wild Wings or Aflac. I think that's a mistake. Like their thinking here is no one is giving money to Aspire, which is Tennessee's collective, or giving money to a huge Auburn collective, hoping that it will benefit their business. They're doing it because they think it will help their football team win.
I think we get pretty skewed just talking about the top 20, 30 teams inside of college sports. We always talk about the Georgias, the Alabamas, the USCs, and it's easy to do that just because of how dominant that they have been, maybe not on the field in some teams' case, but just in terms of their following and their impact on the sport. But you've gone out and like you said, you spoke to over 100 Division I schools. What is the reality of NIL like at these smaller institutions that don't have the giant TV deals, that don't have the millions of fans in their fan base? What's the reality of NIL like for most teams in college football?
It varies a ton. So one thing I think is very important for people to understand is that even though I call it the bagman market, right, which is NIL deals that aren't really tied to marketability, they're tied for recruiting, like that's the biggest market here. That's a big deal. And even if you're like a mid-major basketball player and you've done really well in the SoCon or the Big West and you're going to hit the portal, you can make 6 figures from some of these collectives. Like that is a reality. And mid-major coaches come up to me and they're like, I'm going to lose my guys because we don't have a collective here at Eastern Washington University. And that's true. Like that is going to happen. And I don't know if you can really blame the athletes for that, but there are a lot of athletes, particularly women, who are really taking advantage of the actual marketability in NIL world. People that are signing deals for 4 and 5 figures, people who are giving clinics, people who are signing autographs, the kind of stuff that you had kind of talked about there before. Like that is happening. The number one thing though that's happening at mid majors, whether that is Georgia Southern or Stetson or Mercer or kind of farther on down the line, is most of their athletes aren't participating at all. And part of that isn't because there aren't local businesses that would benefit from working with them. It's because athletes, and I think it's so important for fans to realize this, are so busy. Being a Division I college athlete, even a SoCon softball player, is more than a 20-hour-a-week time commitment. They're going to class, and sometimes they're taking really hard classes. They're traveling, they're in meetings, they're in training. They might only have 10, 12 hours a week to themselves. And a lot of them don't want to spend that time going on Instagram trying to go sell T-shirts. They want to go play Call of Duty. They want to go on dates. They want to go see a movie or do something else. And so they're not engaging with this world. And if you are Georgia Southern or Jacksonville or Mercer, you don't have a small army of staffers to help athletes engage with this. Your compliance team might be 2 people. And so then you have a bunch of athletes that think, I might be interested in this. I don't know where to start. And at the mid-major level especially, those athletes aren't getting that information, even though God knows there's a ton of consultants out there that are offering to give it to them.
We're catching up with Matt Brown from Extra Points with Matt Brown. You can find all of his stuff on extrapointsmb.com or follow him at Matt Brown EP on Twitter. All right, follow me here for a second because the NCAA is trying, and I know a lot of people thought that they were just going to go out quietly, but I've never had that assumption about any multi-billion-dollar business. And so now it seems like they're trying to show their teeth a little bit here and change kind of the punishment landscape around the infractions in terms of NIL, where before it was if you get caught cheating, then the entire program is suspended. Now it looks like the NCAA is moving towards if a program gets caught cheating, that player will be suspended. The team will continue into the postseason, but the coach will be fined and suspended for the postseason as well. And it's also loosening up some restrictions about how you could potentially fire a coach for cause. So I'm seeing Jimbo Fisher lash out. I'm seeing Nick Saban lash out intentionally or not. What kind of pressure do you think these coaches are feeling now where it used to be, hey, we're paying you multi-million dollars to come out and win football games and from the athletic director to fill up the stands and make us a profitable university? Now you have collectives and boosters and all kinds of other funds coming in to make sure you're getting the athletes on top of having to now monitor the transfer portal. Is this coaches kind of looking at this as, man, I already had a high pressure job. Now it might just be unbearable.
You're seeing exactly that. And it's not just coaches. You're seeing this from athletic directors. You've seen this from a couple of conference commissioners at the FCS and the 1 AAA level. And you're seeing this from people all within the industry. And we actually at Extra Points, we just participated in a really massive industry-wide survey from ADs to junior staffers about burnouts and about engagement. We're going to share that in a couple of weeks. This is a major part of it. When you see coaches lash out about it, I, in my experience, for talking to a lot of these guys, it's less about I'm angry now that I have to share some of this money. Nick Saban really doesn't care if Bryce Young is making $10 or $1,000 or $1 million, as long as Bryce Young shows up to practice and performs. The big issue for coaches, particularly in high-pressure jobs like the SEC or the handful of ACC schools that care about college football, is that it's about control. Because if you are the head coach at Tennessee, for example, and there is a collective that has a slush fund now of $20 million that they are using to help entice recruits. Guess what? You don't have an athletic director anymore. Your boss, de facto, is now the head of that collective because that collective decides where that money goes for recruiting. And that collective now isn't just the athletic director. It's also the general manager because maybe the collective decides they want to sign the biggest possible class on 247. So they're going to go after a bunch of high 4 stars or 5 stars that you might not actually want. And now suddenly somebody else says, all right, I got a $300,000 check. I'm ready to sign up here for State U. You also, Lane Kiffin talked about this today, I think, in a really good interview on Sports Illustrated. What happens if the collective shells out $1 million to a kid and he gets to campus and he sucks? As a coach, it's your responsibility to play the players that are going to give you the best chance of winning football games. But now your new shadow boss also wants to make sure that they're getting return on their investment. So all of this becomes very complicated. And we see in pro sports, the coaches that are clashing with management about roster decisions generally get fired and they're not very successful. And I think if we look in the SEC or if we look in the Big 12 at these kind of schools where the booster culture and the football coach and the athletic director are not on the same page, even though God knows they're rich, programs like Auburn, like Tennessee, like Texas A&M, like USC, they haven't, like Miami, they haven't won anything meaningful. And that's what's happening here. And I think coaches are smart enough to realize that is what actually is the big stressor about this NIL world. It's not that players now have more power. It's that boosters now have more power. And that makes their job much harder.
Matt Brown from Extra Points with Matt Brown. Find all the stuff on extrapointsmb.com. Matt, we appreciate the time, man. I know your job, similar to ours, just following this every single day in the ever-changing landscape of college football. It's interesting, and I know it can be tiresome, but, man, we appreciate the work you do.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, guys. And this is the kind of thing that's interesting to you. I think you'll probably enjoy Extra Points.
Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by The Uniform Source. Christian Gokel alongside PJ Zuko. PJ, I thought Matt Brown had an interesting point. That's Matt Brown from extrapoints.com. We're not talking to North Carolina head coach Mac Brown. Matt Brown had an interesting point, even though I think Mac Brown might agree. How tenable do you think the current situation is right now for college football coaches? And I want to look at it from a couple different perspectives, right? You have mid-level, I think mid-major is more like a college basketball term. So you have like the mid-level schools, right? Say the NC States, right? You have the smaller schools, right? The App States, the Georgia Southerns, the Marshalls, right? You have the schools that are even smaller than that, right? We get so skewed looking at the big time teams because that's who a majority of the people want to hear about, right? So that being said, different pressures for different coaches, but how tenable do you think is a situation where, say, you are Billy Napier or you are Kirby Smart and you have a collective that's out there and they're going after these high school recruits and getting them these numbers out in front of them and trying to get them committed to Georgia. And as Matt said in the last segment, they might not even be players that your coach wants, but as a head coach, you're now answering to an athletic director, answering to a fan base, and also answering to technically a company that's not affiliated with you, but is pouring money into getting players for your team. Then you have, like we said, the mid-level schools that are trying to become the higher level schools, get up there and compete every single year. NC State beat Clemson last year, right? But at the same time, you don't have that same kind of financial base and you're losing players to bigger schools every time you get a freshman who's really good. They're going to come in and just, take them away from you. And so you're having to self-recruit every single year. And then to another degree, the smaller schools after that, where you can't hold on to your good players. And at that same breath, you're not getting the same type of name, image, and likeness opportunities. So you're getting pressure saying, hey, why can't we do this for our players? Like, it's not the same. How tenable do you think the situation is for college football coaches? Because Kevin's talked about it. We just saw Matt Luke say bleep it and leave.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why we talk about all these different changes and all these different, guidelines and situations and things that could possibly be coming. And I think need to be coming is I don't think it's very tenable. I think we're going to see.
Would you call it untenable?
I guess. Yeah. I just, not gonna lie. We like to peel back the curtain here. You said that word so many times. I had to look up the definition. Like I was waiting for you to say another word to describe it. And I was just like, crap, I just got to look this up. So no, I have to agree. And that's why we talk about all these different things and all these different possibilities that how do we make this better? How do we change this a little bit? How do we kind of reel this in a little bit? Because if we don't, who knows where it's going to go and who knows what kind of insanely big differences that we haven't already seen that we could see. And I think at the heart of all of that is something that you and me talk about a lot, and it's competition. And it's actual like decent competition between schools and between football teams and things like that. Now, of course, this isn't only affecting football teams, but no, that's one of the major things, of course. But competition and parity. And when you have things going in this direction, it seems like, the bigger schools, the higher echelon schools that you talk about are going to separate themselves even more. And everyone's going to kind of find their grouping that they fit into, and the differences between those groupings and the other ones are going to get even bigger. Yeah. That's just what it seems like so far. So you talk about it lasting with just the way that it currently is. I don't know if it can or if it does.
Well, I think we've seen interesting answers to this, i.e. Kirby Smart has had some players enter the transfer portal, and he said, all right, he said, we're going to,
what do you want me to do?
He said, we're going to, because we talked about Lane Kiffin's example of Bryce Young should have entered the transfer portal, and then use that as leverage to get Nick Saban and Alabama to come off more cheese to keep them, right? Kirby Smart, I think, kind of had the answer to that. And I'm not like trying to pat Kirby Smart on the back here. I'm just saying I think this is going to be the reality for a lot of coaches is I recruited you to come to the school. You're a 4 or 5 star. And now because you haven't played in 1 year and it's looking like you're going to be fighting for a job this year, you're wanting to transfer out. If you want to go, bye. Like, I can only focus on the people who want to be here. There's just not the brain capacity.
It's hard enough to
Right.
focus on that.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, I'm already having to recruit guys that are 3 years younger than you, right? I'm already looking at sophomores and juniors in high school. I don't have time for you to come back and try to do some sort of contract ploy. Because, like, listen, you want to go out and make money, go out and make money. If you feel like you can make some more elsewhere, God bless you. But it's just eventually it's going to come to the point where the players are going to say, I want this. And the coaches are going to say, well, go find it.
Yep.
If that school wants to give it to you, cool. If they're in our division, we'll see you later this year.
Right.
And I think that's how we're starting to see this come about a little bit. I understand Lane Kiffin's point. It is a power play that potentially you could put out there as a player. Agreed. Completely agreed. Is it completely against the rules of the NIL as they currently stand? Absolutely. But that being said, it's still something you could do potentially, right? Behind closed doors, you could do that. But what we never talk about is the way it could go wrong. And so now all of a sudden you're a big time quarterback and you actually wanted to stay there, stay at your school, but you come out there, you throw it down and they call your bluff. And all of a sudden you're saying, oh, how do you go back to practice after that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, with some schools, you can't go back to practice after that because you're not on the team anymore.
And I'm not saying
and that's not every coach,
I'm not
but
saying the coach can't coach a player that makes more money than him. It happens in the NFL every single day.
yeah, of course.
What I'm saying is when you throw down a gauntlet like that and somebody calls your bluff on it, you have completely changed the dynamic of that relationship.
Yep.
And so how am I supposed to trust you as a coach after that?
Like you said, how are the players supposed to, not only the coaches, how are the players supposed to view you at the same time?
Where does it stop? Like, okay, I got more money. Coach, I'm not really liking this 3 wide set that we've been running. I think we should be focusing on more up tempo, a lot more 11 personnel. I don't know that we should be running the football that much.
Right.
Oh, you think we should be running it more? I got a similar NIL offer right down the road and they like to sling the rock around. And that just might be better for me. You know what? All right, bye.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see. And obviously this will be handled behind closed doors for the most part, but it's going to get interesting to see how these head coaches start to handle this. We got to take a quick break. We'll come back and get you ready for 3 and Out next. 3 and Out coming up next right here on ESPN Radio. Kevin Thomas and Ben Troop getting you ready for the weekend. We'll have Braves and Marlins coming up for you here just after 3 and Out. We'll have them throughout the weekend. We'll be off on Monday for Memorial Day, just like Buck Bennett, the father of BJ Bennett, always likes to say. Memorial Day, a time to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice, but every day, Memorial Day for Gold Star family. So our thoughts and prayers with everyone that's going to have a tough weekend, remembering back on their loved ones. So again, we'll be out Monday, but we'll talk to everyone on Tuesday. 3 and Out coming up next.